Yeah.
Got it. All right. All right, everyone, welcome to our first surrogacy panel discussion by surrogates for surrogates. So today what we're going to do, we're going to have Ashley, Sarah, and Brittany talk about their story to surrogacy, their surrogacy journey, and kind of any advice they have for anyone considering to become a surrogate. And then Ashley's going to do a quick presentation on more of the educational aspects of surrogacy, catered to surrogates. Okay. So Ashley, do you want to get us started about how you came across surrogacy and your journey and any advice that you have?
Sure. So I guess I thought about surrogacy a long time ago when I saw it on Friends when Phoebe was a surrogate, but more recently, I'm in a same-sex marriage, so we obviously needed a sperm donor to have our son. And after having him, I just got to thinking how without someone's help, I would have never had him. And he's just everything to me, and how I wanted to give back to someone else the same way that our sperm donor gave to us. So then I looked into surrogacy soon after that and had my first journey. I carried twins for a couple, gay male couple from Switzerland. So I carried twins for them and we became very, very close. And it was a very beautiful journey. And I guess my advice, I don't know. Education, I think, is really great because I went into it without knowing a whole lot and I just kind of learned along the way. I got really lucky in my journey, but I've read now that there are women not so lucky all the time. And just go into it with an open heart.
And who did you use?
Or I went through IARC surrogacy in the city, in Minneapolis, sorry.
And how did you find out about them?
I found out about them. A friend of mine went through them many years ago, actually, but then also just a quick Google search, they were the closest ones to me. And like I said, I didn't know a whole lot. So I just kind of went with them and didn't do a lot of research on other agencies.
Okay. Brittany?
Let's see. I started thinking about surrogacy when my child was about 2 or 3. My best friend since kindergarten, now she's married, same-sex marriage. And I always said, I'll help you out. I'll have one for you. Well, they have never been ready. So I eventually became a NICU nurse and just experienced and watched a lot of families go through infertility and infant loss, and I've seen so much, but that just kind of pushed me to really do it. And I just jumped right in. I found that was in 2019, December is whenever I applied with my agency, Caring Hope Surrogacy. It's a fairly new agency. I did research other agencies, but something was just telling me to go with them, even though we're new. And, like on the Facebook groups, they tell you, don't, jump into new groups and all that. I gave him a chance.
We're going to tell you that too.
I gave him a chance. I mean, you've got to start somewhere.
Yes.
And I had all hope and faith in this couple of girls women that started. So no complaints. My journey's fine. Nothing went wrong.
Good.
Successful journey. My journey was great. I delivered my she was a girl, delivered her in July 16th this year. So a few months ago. Family from Memphis. We keep in contact. The journey was amazing. I had a lot of support with my family and my coworkers since I worked in the NICU. It was just amazing being around all those girls. And then my piece of advice I would tell someone is to make sure that you do have the support system. I'm a single mother, but my child's dad lives in about an hour and a half away from me. So having my mom a mile away and my brother close by and my friends, that is the most important thing so far with me is support system. You've got to have that support system because you have lots of appointments and going to clinic, and it takes a lot of your time. It took up a lot of my time. So that's what I would say, my biggest advice.
So when you picked your agency, did you already know the couple that you were going to help, or did you join the agency and then they found you somebody?
I joined the agency first. I joined the agency first and then was matched. Yes.
Okay. And did you was it did you meet them online?
So yes, we did our first meeting online in a Zoom meeting, and After that, my first time meeting them was my first appointment, and we went to dinner the night before. I went to Memphis. So Memphis is only 3 hours from me, so I live in Nashville. Went to Memphis and we had dinner the night before, and then I went to my appointment the next day. But yeah, the first meeting was online.
All right, nice. And then Sarah, so Sarah did an independent journey, so she has a little bit of a different story. Well, I just spoiled it a little bit, but you have a lot more to tell, so go ahead.
Yes. So I'm Sarah. I did an independent journey. So I had in my head for a long time that I wanted to be a surrogate, but I never really pursued it because I had heard a radio ad for doing it just a few years after my daughter was born. We have a one and done child, and knew quickly that we were, done. But I loved being pregnant, and I thought it would just be an amazing thing to be able to do for somebody. And so when I heard this advertisement, I think I was, mid 30s, and it was calling for people, under 32 or whatever. So it's just, I didn't know much about it. I mean, it was like on, some radio station. So I don't even know what the agency was or anything, but I just kind of had in my head that I was too old. And then I met through a mutual friend, I met a reproductive lawyer who is now a friend of mine. And we just got to chatting, and I was like, and I just kind of offhand said, oh, I always thought it would be so fun to be a surrogate. And she was like, well, you still can. So we started chatting, and she let me know that it could work. And so we talked a lot, and I did a ton of research. I was 39. I turned 40 while pregnant. So I was 39 when it all started. And the baby was born in February of this year. So he's right about 10 months old. I met my intended mom. She's a single mom. And I met her through this lawyer, now friend of mine. She had gotten hooked up with Judith is her name, the lawyer's name. And Judith knew her and knew me, and, reached out to both of us and were like, hey, I think you guys might be a good match. Would you be willing to meet? And we met, and it was an instant connection. And because of having, obviously, so my intended mom used her as an attorney. And so I had a different attorney, but because I had just so many people around me that had information, we did an independent journey, and I loved it. It went really well. Yeah. So that's sort of how I came to do an independent journey. Loved the whole process. I describe it as being magical. I just think it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And yeah, so I think the biggest piece of advice is also education, and just learning as much as you can, listening, if you can find podcasts, if you can read blogs, talk to other surrogates, just do your research and kind of know what you're getting into. And I think a lot of it is really just mindset and knowing what you're doing. And obviously you learn so much going through it, but just hearing from other people who have done it. And as I went through that process, it just really solidified in me that it was something that I really wanted to do.
So when you were doing it, did you know any other surrogates?
No.
No.
I still actually haven't met in person. I still haven't met in person another surrogate. So it's lovely to be on here and, met kind of virtually. I was in a Facebook transfer group. So that was nice. But yeah, no, I didn't know any other surrogates.
That's kind of, that's amazing. Because you don't know, when you're walking around, who has been a surrogate before.
I know. Yeah.
But awesome. That's great. Okay, so we can transition to the educational part of the panel discussion. And again, if anyone has any questions, comments of the things that we're going to talk about, this is just all informational kind of what are the first things you need to know about surrogacy if you're thinking about becoming a surrogate? So Ashley's going to go ahead and.
Okay. Share my screen. Okay, so these are the topics that we're going to be going over today. Surrogate guidelines, risks of surrogacy pregnancy, medical insurance in surrogacy, lawyers and escrow companies, compensation and benefits, and independent versus agency managed. So these are just the ASRM guidelines. This is what most agencies are going to usually have these guidelines in place for surrogates, but it's ultimately up to your fertility clinic what they allow or don't allow. But we'll start with being between the ages of 21 and 41 years old. You've had no more than 3 C-sections. You have a good support system. You do not smoke tobacco, use drugs, or abuse alcohol. Your BMI is below 32. You've had a previous healthy pregnancy and delivery. Your criminal record is clean. You're financially stable and independent. And we just want to add with that, it's just they usually, like, you should not be on any state assistance or like such as Section 8 or welfare, food stamps, anything like that. They usually won't approve you. You have no significant history of depression or mental illness, and you reside in the US in a surrogate friendly state. So what we mean by that is most agencies should not allow gestational carriers that live in Nebraska, Louisiana, or Michigan. And then one of the newer ones is that you're vaccinated against COVID-19.
So I just wanted to jump into here. So like Sarah was saying, she was hearing these advertisements from surrogacy agencies of who they were seeking to join their agency. But it's not necessarily the case that you wouldn't be able to be a surrogate, because it's the fertility clinic who makes the final call. And it's the fertility clinic, they generally use these guidelines to determine who they would accept as a surrogate. But again, like fertility clinics, for example, there's variation among fertility clinics on whether or not they require the vaccination, the COVID-19 vaccination. So these are just guidelines, but you will find fertility clinics who might accept somebody who doesn't follow these guidelines. So there's really like, there are usual, A, B, and C, D that you need to follow, but there is some wiggle room sometimes, depending on the situation, in good and bad ways.
Yeah.
All right. That's kind of what I wanted to input, but great job, Ashley. Go ahead.
I've been hearing of some agencies that are allowing 19-year-old surrogates in some of the Facebook groups that I'm in. So that was a little shocking. But yeah, some are more lax or more strict, I guess. So the risks of surrogate pregnancy. So a lot of the time women become surrogates because, let's say, they usually have really easy pregnancies of their own children. But IVF pregnancies can add like new complications. They don't always, but they can, such as you're more likely to birth multiples, like twins or triplets, more likely to end early because babies conceived through IVF have a higher chance of being born early, more likely to cause preeclampsia, such as high blood pressure, more likely to experience bleeding in the first trimester. So actually I experienced that bleeding early into my surrogacy journey. I had never had early bleeding with my pregnancies, but with my surro babies, I was bleeding really early on after the transfer. And I remember just sobbing to my wife that I thought I was losing the babies and I didn't know how I was going to tell their dads. And then I was seen by my doctor and called my fertility clinic, who said that it's actually very, very common to bleed in the first, trimester with IVF pregnancies, which no one told me that or to look out for that or anything. So that was really scary for me. And now I've heard that it happens to a lot of other surrogates as well. Mm-hmm. Twice as likely to birth IVF singletons prematurely compared to naturally conceived singleton births.
Yeah. So like for our experience, like our surrogate had preeclampsia, but she didn't have preeclampsia with her first. So it is a significant risk that you might have something different this time.
Yeah.
I
And
would add into that as well that I got postpartum preeclampsia, which I didn't know was even a thing going into it. So, 3 days after I had just gone home, like 2 days after the C-section, and then thankfully went back the next day to get an incision check, and my blood pressure was through the roof. And
my goodness.
yeah, it was crazy. So yeah, I tell everybody I know that, just because I didn't know that was possible to have postpartum preeclampsia when everything was fine during the pregnancy. And it was fine, it all ended fine, of course. And thankfully I was able to get treatment very quickly. But just as a heads up, that's also a possibility.
And how did you feel? Like, did you feel like you were sick before you went for your incision?
So no, I didn't. I think I was probably within a few hours of starting to experience symptoms from preeclampsia. I just went in on my own because my incision to me looked like it was a little bit infected. And so I wanted to just check it.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of the normal. I showed up and they take your blood pressure is like the first thing. And she was like, because I normally have very low blood pressure. And she's like, let's just try that again. And then it just kind of kept climbing as we were even in the appointment. And so I think I just got kind of lucky that I'd gotten it checked. I would have started experiencing symptoms within the next few hours. And we went straight back to the hospital and was there for a few more days. But yeah, so that's kind of what happened to me. What's that?
Did you have to do the magnesium drip?
Yes, I did the 24-hour magnesium drip, which was something else. Yeah, so it's not fun. You're like bedridden for 24 hours. I mean, my daughter's been in and out of the hospital a lot, and so we have a lot of medical knowledge and experience. And so I don't want to say it wasn't a big deal, because it is, right? Like when you're a blood pressure thing is a big deal. However, because of our experience, I wasn't as freaked out or necessarily as worried as so for what it's worth.
You have that experience. So that's and another thing with the bleeding, like the early first trimester bleeding, that was also, in our case, our surrogate had that as well. And when I posted on Instagram, like Ashley mentioned, like everyone kept saying, oh, I had the same thing happen to me, all these surrogates. So if you're starting off as a surrogate and you're bleeding in the first trimester, I mean, I know the impulse is to think of the worst, but it does happen. And it's not just like a little drip. I mean, like sometimes it's like, oh, wow, that could be so it's not going to be automatically like a really bad situation.
And I'm going to chime in.
Yeah.
Towards the end, I had protein in my urine. The last appointment I had protein in my urine, and my blood pressure was high once I got admitted, but it was never high in any of my OB appointments. So I don't even know that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I had to do the whole magnesium and all that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
after the fact, you had to do the postpartum?
No, it was
during.
I got admitted. Yeah. Like my blood pressure was my 38-week appointment. She said it was perfect. It was done manually. So, they don't ever tell you or show you. And then I had protein in my urine that day. And the next morning, my doctor's like, just go ahead, come in. And she's like, we're going to stop it at the beginning. So yeah, I had to get on mag, and my blood pressure, of course, was high in the hospital. Environmental. But but yeah, I was in bed for 3 days straight. Couldn't get up. No food at all for 3 days, and in the bed for 3 days.
So yours never escalated. They were able to stop it.
Yeah.
What's happening? Wow.
Yeah. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
That is awesome. Okay, so next is medical insurance aspects of surrogacy. So typically, if you have medical insurance that does not explicitly deny surrogate pregnancies, then the expectation is that the intended parents will use your insurance to the extent possible, and then pay for any co-pays. So as a note, we left that there's no evidence to suggest that using your insurance for pregnancies raises premiums if that's a concern. And it is possible that your medical insurance actually will not cover a surrogacy pregnancy. So it's important that the IPs do a thorough investigation. There are services they can hire to do that if they're not going through an agency, or even if they are and the agency doesn't thoroughly look. So yeah, so my IPs used my medical insurance, and it was really easy actually. And they just paid for any bills that came for the pregnancy, like pregnancy related or after. I would just send them to my agency, and then they would make sure that they were paid. So I never had any issues with that. And then if you don't have medical insurance, the intended parents will have to find a policy for you. And if you have medical insurance, you may be able to negotiate a higher compensation, because it's always an added bonus for intended parents to not have to purchase that separately.
Yeah, the negotiation part, usually if you're signed up with an agency, they kind of do that on your behalf, but this is kind of more if you're, doing an independent route and you're thinking about compensation in general, and what are some things that you should be compensated for, having medical insurance that would cover your surrogacy pregnancy is an added bonus. I mean, so, that's something that you could charge for your compensation. Yeah. And then the service is usually at risk, but that's probably beyond what you need to know.
Do you guys have anything to add about insurance stuff?
I had to use my insurance through the hospital where I work. It does not cover surrogacy. It's a Catholic hospital. It's a Catholic hospital, so they don't cover surrogacy. So my intended parents purchased through Marketplace.
Okay.
And just got some insurance with that. And I would
Did
just
they use at risk? Do you know if they used at risk?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we were able to use my insurance. Can we name drop insurances on here? Does it matter? Okay.
Yeah.
We've got Kaiser. And I know Kaiser's only in a few states, but I'm in Colorado. We've got Kaiser. And so they did do my intended mom, paid Art Risk to check it out. And basically Kaiser said that it covered it. However, they could come back later and say you could have to pay the intended parent could have to pay a certain amount or something, but they never did. And both my lawyer and my intended mom's lawyer said they've never seen Kaiser actually do that. So it ended up being pretty easy. Same thing for here, where I would just send the bills off to the intended mom or the bills that came in. So it was super easy.
Did you use an escrow?
So I'm going to say something here that I probably wouldn't recommend to a lot of people, is that we didn't use an escrow. It was all built into our contract, but the intended mom just paid me directly. So I would say I would recommend everybody to use an escrow. I didn't have any issues at all. She was amazing. And we just, just did it that way, and it worked out beautifully. But I know that there can be, nightmare situations with that. So I would probably recommend to other people to use an escrow, even though it went really well.
Yeah.
Without one.
Yeah, I've heard more and more. I was asking that the other day, and there are, a handful of surrogates and IPs who didn't use an escrow. But yes, I agree with you. It's probably usually recommended.
Yeah.
So we have a question from the crowd. So if using an agency, I assume they know your insurance information beforehand. Do IPs have the option to only look at GCs who have certain insurance?
One part of that, I did have to give my insurance information prior, like in the beginning phases of signing up before I was matched. And so my agency, as far as I knew, was going to take care of all that, have their team look over it. And then if it didn't cover, then they would have me get started on a insurance prior to matching me. But that's just how mine worked. But I can't really answer to if IPs can pick surrogates based on insurance through an agency.
So yeah, so when I started the process, I didn't even want to think about, oh, what happens if she doesn't have insurance? So we made it a requirement. Oh, we only want to look at surrogates who have medical insurance, just because it just seemed, and also we started looking after open enrollment closed. But at that time, I didn't really know much about it. So yes, you can, IPs do have the opportunity to say that they only want to consider surrogates who have medical insurance. But having said that, that really limits your options potentially. And, depending on the time of year, it's actually not, I don't know if it's, I don't know if I would do it again, if I had to do it again. Like, I don't know if we would make that requirement, because you can hire Art Risk to help you navigate that. And it's not as scary as I thought it was going to be from the IP side.
Yeah.
To deal with that. All right.
Next.
Yep.
Okay. So surrogacy lawyers and escrow companies. So we just said that you should 100% be represented by a lawyer separate from the lawyer representing your IPs. Generally, the IP's lawyer will recommend someone that they have worked with in the past, or you can use Facebook groups to check reviews. Pick a lawyer that you click with. This becomes even more important if you're doing an independent journey. Independent and agency managed journeys should always involve an escrow company. This ensures that you get your money back ASAP. So with my agency, they gave me a list of lawyers that they recommended or had worked with in the past. However, they did note that I could use someone else that wasn't on their list if I wanted to. So I don't know how it works for everybody.
Same for me.
Yeah, same.
Mm-hmm.
And my lawyer was really great and had been working with surrogacy, representing surrogates for a long time. So that worked out really well for me, because the legal part was very stressful for me. I mean, it wasn't like it was anything hard. It's just legal jargon and stuff that's really hard to understand and make sure you're covered. So it was nice to have someone who had your back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, that is 100% be represented by a lawyer that's separate. And mine is the same thing. My lawyer friend who was representing the intended mom gave me multiple people to contact. So I was able to find another good lawyer in the area.
So throughout the journey, Sarah, because you mentioned before that, instead of having an agency, you had all these other people that had experience in the surrogacy world, and that kind of helped you like go through it. Were you in close contact to the original lawyer who found you the IPs?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, because I know that this is quite a bit different than is typical, but yes, like and we're still friends, we're still in contact and talk frequently. And she's actually invited me to come with her to different, events where she's talking about surrogacy. So yeah, so I was in really close contact with her. She wrote up the contract first for the intended mom, and then sent it to my lawyer. And then I went over everything with my lawyer, and my lawyer, gave some feedback on stuff and was like, hey, you could think about these things. And so it all went really well, but she was a huge source of information for me throughout it, even though she was my, she obviously didn't represent me legally, but she was a good source of information for me throughout the process.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good.
And just adding about escrow, I think it's really important to have. That was a very easy process for me. Just submitting things and getting reimbursed within like 2 days, or it was really fast.
Yeah. Talk about that some more. So do you know which escrow company you had?
We use C-Trust Escrow.
Okay.
And then so like any bills that I got, which were very few, I would just submit them. And then I wouldn't even send them to my intended parents. I would just submit it and get it back. I didn't have to come out of pocket for anything at all, but
Yeah,
I would just get the bill, submit it, and they would send it. So they would.
How would you submit it? Would it be like a photo of it, or would
Right,
you
yes.
Okay.
Yep. Just click that you're the surrogate, you upload the photo and what it's for, and then it's pretty much the bill. Submit it, and then couple days, turns around, they send me the money, and then I can just pay the bill. So
Okay.
I kind of liked knowing that I was able to pay it, so I know it got paid.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Mine was a little different. I would send it to my coordinator and then she would pay it online or call and pay it. So I never had to like deal with paying them at all, but she would send me like confirmations and stuff so that I was sure that they got paid. Or she would have them send me the confirmation email or something like that, but they took care of everything.
yeah, I did that at the beginning, but I was like, I can do it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I was the whole time.
Do this.
So.
And Sarah, you use Venmo?
No, we used like a direct like wire transfer basically. So
Okay.
I would submit bills directly to the IM and I would just scan everything and send it to her via email so that she had records of everything as well.
Okay.
And then she just with same thing within a couple of days she would transfer the money straight to me and I would end up paying. I would pay the bill, same thing when I know it's paid, and then she would just reimburse. So it's pretty easy.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I need to.
Oh, wait,
What?
we have another question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, this may be a weird question. It's not. Is it hard to separate this process on a personal and a business perspective? Obviously, both are important, but are they difficult to keep separate from both IP and GC perspective? Does it ever get weird because of the money?
In my opinion, it doesn't because, well, I guess for me, it was different because with the agency, I never had to talk to my intended parents about the money at all. Yeah, so it didn't make it feel weird for me. Like all the money stuff was talked about from the agency to me and then from the agency to my intended parents. We talked a lot about it afterwards, but it didn't feel transactional because it didn't feel business-like to me. I don't know how to really explain it. It just came from such a totally different place and the money just kind of, I guess, helps for what you know, for 9 months of being pregnant with twins or with even one baby or whatever, but it didn't feel business-like in any way ever for me.
That's the same. I never spoke money with my intended parents at all. It never came up at all. But yeah, same as Ashley.
And I would say I did have direct conversations about money with my intended mom and it was fine.
Mhm.
I think it could have been different if she had been a different person. But it was all very, very easy. So yeah, it worked out really well. And thankfully, I mean, that's also why you have contracts as well. So everybody knows exactly what you're walking into and what expectations are and what on both sides. But I didn't find it weird at all either. I thought it went really smoothly and easily.
I think it helps not feel business-like or like to not have to worry about talking about the money and stuff, even independent or agency, because both surrogates and IPs go into it knowing like that there's going to be money involved and have already sorted that part out with themselves or within their own families or something like that. So then it's just not like an issue when it comes time to, you know, have your match or talk to your surrogate about it because you already know like this is what it's going to cost me or this is what I'm going to get paid or whatever. So it's not something that has to be a concern between IPs and surrogates.
Yeah, the legal contract, I think really like Sarah mentioned before, is like so helpful because it's done and it's discussed before moving forward at all. And in the contract, you have everything that might happen. And if this happens, this is what is owed, this is what is expected. So it's not like, you know, things come up unexpectedly during the journey. And then it's like, wait, how much do we pay for X, Y, Z? Or, you know, so there's not really like a negotiation that happens because it's all in the contract. That's why the contract is so important. So I think like having that, you know, at the very first, basically not the first step, but before anything really happens is so helpful. and kind of forgetting about the business part and just kind of going on.
Yeah. And enjoying the journey.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so compensation and benefits. So the average agency managed first-time baseline surrogate compensation in the US is about $33,000. We added a note that in California, first-time surrogates can make around 39,000, which makes surrogacy costs significantly higher than national average in California. Surrogates should expect an additional 5 to 10,000 in compensation for each completed journey. Meaning that if you're an experienced surrogate, you can oftentimes ask for a little bit more money, since you've already experienced it and gone through surrogacy and know what it entails. After all, I already said that. There are many factors that can play into how much you make total in your surrogacy journey. For example, if you carry multiples, you'll receive an added bonus if you that will add to your compensation. Also things like C-section, having a C-section, you can make a little bit more loss of reproductive organs during birth. I'm trying to think of other ones.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah. This isn't like, it's not, yeah, I mean, it's like you're getting paid. I mean, not, you're getting paid because of something that you have to go through, like
Yeah.
a C-section, a loss of a reproductive organ, or
Procedures.
What'd you say?
the invasive
Procedures, any invasive
Yep.
procedures.
Yep.
Yeah, any of that. Yeah, so right. So I guess we don't mean it to be like, oh, this is an opportunity for you to make money, but it's just that
No, it's just
totally what you
reimbursement
get.
for things that you go, like extra things you might
Right.
go through that you otherwise may not have gone through.
Yes, and not that Ashley was saying, but it was.
No, I know you weren't. I know you weren't.
But just it's just so hard to know how much you'll eventually get.
Yeah. Same with like like the benefits. So you'll get like a monthly allowance that will go towards gas, to and from your appointments, like extra places you might have to go because of the surrogacy, prenatal vitamins, or any other pregnancy related costs, travel reimbursement. So for example, I had to fly to San Diego for my medical clearance appointment and my transfer. So they paid obviously for those flights, hotel, like a rental car, and then any food while you're there. But it's always like a quick turnaround trip. Well, at least for me, it was like a 2-day. One was like a 1-day trip and one was a 2-day trip. So that's all paid, like reimbursed to you. And then maternity clothes allowance, which usually comes, mid-pregnancy when you're starting to show, you'll get a maternity clothes allowance. Some places offer a sign-on bonus or like signing up bonus. And then bonuses for hitting certain pregnancy milestones, such as when you start your medications, when you go for the embryo transfer, things like that.
Yeah, and they don't always happen. Like there's just different ways that either you can you'll get more money, but you'll get a certain and your compensation is usually, and I guess this also varies, but like every month that you're pregnant, you get a little. Is that how you guys had, like every month of the pregnancy, you would get like the base?
Yes.
And so sometimes that amount might be higher, or maybe they'll do, like a sign-on bonus. These aren't things that you necessarily see. It's just like there's many different ways that it can happen. And I feel like even the baseline compensation, that $33,000, that was based in like 2019-ish. But I think in like 2020, like there was because there's a lot more surrogates now, compared to a lot fewer, I'm sorry, there's not that many surrogates these days. So that compensation is up higher these days.
Yeah.
So, it varies. There's just so many things that can play a role. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you didn't have a signing bonus on your contract, it doesn't mean that your agency is like,
No.
it's just that all of these things are all different. And you may see these things and or not.
Yeah, I've heard like other agencies will reimburse or like have some sort of set amount you can make if you pump, like
Mhm.
after pregnancy and things like that, where my agency didn't. So I pumped for the twins for a little while, but that was all completely just because I chose to do that for them. But then a friend of mine's agency, who we've gone live with, her agency paid her for pumping, or her IPs, I guess, paid her for pumping. So every agency is so different. And then every agency's monthly allowance is very different as well.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything to add?
My agency supplied all of this, the signing bonus and the pumping. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so independent versus agency managed surrogacy journeys. So for independent, which Sarah, you might be able to talk more on this
Yeah.
one, but we just kind of put a few highlighted points that this could, an independent journey could be cheaper for intended parents because of how much money their like IPs pay to the agencies for that their assistance, I guess, and their what they help with, and them going between surrogate and IP. Sometimes that's lower compensation for surrogates as well because the IPs may not have as high of budgets. A surrogate may have more bargaining power also because of the fact that the IPs aren't paying so much for an agency. So it could go both ways. Like you might have lower compensation or you could have higher because your agency or your IPs aren't paying an agency. Also, it's less strict. There might be less rules. The fertility clinic may be the only rules you have to overcome as opposed to being locked in by the agency's rules. So and then agency managed is obviously more expensive for intended parents. And then it's usually higher compensation for surrogates, less bargaining power because typically with agencies, they have like I said, like a locked in set of guidelines or rules or way they do things and the way things are happening. There's a little more support on that side because you have your coordinators and all that stuff. And then more strict, obviously. Same as I guess with more guidelines and things like that. Anything you guys want to
Yeah. What do you guys think about these trade-offs? Do you think they're right, or are we missing anything, or?
Oh, no, that looks correct. The support most definitely on the agency managed. But I mean, like if I did this again, I think I would still do agency managed. It was just, I feel like it'd go a lot smoother. I don't know. I don't know, Sarah, what do you think? Like, did you feel like you had to like advocate for yourself a lot since you were independent?
It's so smooth. And I know that, you know, that's not the case for everyone, but mine really was very, very smooth. I felt like the fertility clinic that we went through was also amazing, and they were very hands-on. And so I would say my part of the reason I went independent is when we did meet the intended mom, like it did save her money, and I kind of liked that idea. She was very kind in that I didn't ask, but when they worked up the
agreement.
Yes, thank you. Agreement. She was like, hey, I want to give you a little bit extra because we didn't go through an agency, and that saved me money. So yeah, I would say that, like, from what I've heard, a lot of people will say, you know, it's best to do agency for a first journey.
Mhm.
I feel like I was really
Lucky
in a lot of ways that it just went so well, and I was just surrounded by exactly the people I needed to be for it to go really smoothly. So I would just say to anybody trying to decide either way is really be mindful when you're thinking through it. And if you if you feel like you need any other additional support, then 100% goes through an agency, because they do a lot of the legwork. There was a lot more legwork that we had to do because there wasn't an agency that was doing all that for us. But for our situation, it worked really, really well. And I would do it again.
Yeah.
So
Would you do it independent? See, that's kind of like, do you feel so lucky that you're like, oh my goodness, if I did it again, I don't know if I'd get that lucky again. So maybe I should go through an agency.
no, that's a good question. No, I think if I were to do it again, then I would consider an independent journey again, depending on the situation. For sure. I didn't find it scary at all. I think because we went by the book with the lawyers and the agreement, and I mean, there was a few things like we didn't do the escrow, which
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't regret it, and I personally would do it again. I think because I had the people around me to kind of help navigate that really helped.
It's great.
Okay, so we made a little list of red flags for both independent journeys and agency managed journeys, which Sarah's kind of covered some of these. Like,
Yeah.
you should feel protected by your IPs. Clearly, her IP had her back and cared about what she was doing, and that she was helping her out with it, not going through an agency, things like that. If you don't feel protected by them, that could be a red flag. Any feeling like they are exploiting you is not normal. Run, use your gut. You're not locked into anything, until that contract is signed, obviously. And remember that you are providing them a great service, so you have the control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would just add to, not necessarily a red flag, but just make sure you have a good attorney and make sure that your contract is what it should be. But yes, absolutely, with all of those things. And my IM was just like so beyond grateful the entire time, and just was like, I can't believe you're doing this, which for me, I was like, this feels fun. I'm so happy that you allow me to. I mean, it's a big amount of trust to allow somebody else to carry your child.
Yes.
That's a huge deal. And so I felt kind of the same way. And so
Yeah.
it really worked both ways. But absolutely, you should not feel exploited. You should feel protected. All of those things. Yes.
Isn't it crazy how your IPs feel so like they feel so thankful and honored that you chose them, but like they don't realize that we feel the same way. Like they could have picked so many other surrogates and stuff, and they're like, you picked me? What? Like, you want me to carry your babies?
100%.
It works both ways. It's honoring both ways, I feel like.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that. They just think we're doing them this, like, we are doing them a favor, but I feel like it also we feel so grateful to have been picked by them too. Yeah.
Yes.
Which I don't think they think about, because in there,
Definitely
like,
not.
someone's giving me a baby. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not.
Oh, are you getting a
I always cry when I hear that. It's just insane that you feel that way. It's just
Seriously, I remember.
Insane. It's just like I mean, this is why surrogacy, we love it. Like, anyway, good.
Yeah. It's so beautiful.
It is.
So red flags for agency managed journeys: we put pressuring you into anything you do not want to do or do not feel comfortable with. Telling you that you will be matched easier if you change something you put on your application. An example that we thought of was like selective reduction or any testing of any sort. If you feel really strongly about something, don't let them change your mind by saying like, you might be matched faster or easier if you change that, because you won't be able to live with yourself. No online presence or other surrogates that have worked with them, extremely outdated, or no social media. Brittany made a good point that you got to shoot your shot sometimes and give the underdog a chance. But like, if they're offering some outrageous, like, I've had people message me that they're starting these new agencies, they have nothing on social media, they're offering me some crazy amount of money for my baseline pay, but they have no surrogates that I can talk to that have worked with them. They have no social media presence. Like, that's a huge red flag. So don't just be like excited about what they're telling you, because you got to do your research. If you aren't allowed to contact or hear stories about their previous surrogates that they've worked with. So anyone have anything to add about agencies? I guess, Brittany, what made you feel like,
Yeah.
Well,
like,
just
what was that? Obviously your like own sense, just like you feel it in your gut. Sometimes you just
Right.
know.
well, whenever I spoke to them, I felt like because these bigger companies, you're just a number, and
Yeah.
I felt like with something as small as the agency that I'm working with, I didn't feel like a number. Like I was able to message them at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, anytime, and they were always available. And now it's growing. I was the 15th surrogate to
Wow.
deliver. Yeah, so it's growing. We've got like 10 more ladies that are pregnant right now. So
Oh,
I don't know. I just felt like that I would be a number and with a bigger agency and
yeah.
just talking to them. I don't know. It just felt easy. It felt
kind
and
of-
I didn't, you know, like I didn't notice any of these other flags that you're talking about, but it just felt easy with them. And
It felt right.
yeah, it felt
Yeah.
right.
I kind of felt like that was my agency a little bit after I had my surrogate twins. Like 2 days after I had them, I got an email from my agency asking if I was ready to start my next journey. And I had just had a C-section with twins and was
Mhm.
2 days recovered, and they were asking me to start my second journey. And so I guess in that moment, I felt like just a number or like a animal or something. But like until then I didn't really see that, and now I definitely wouldn't like use them again, because like that kind of turned me off from going through them for my second journey. But that made me feel that feeling of being just a number. But I think that's our whole
Yeah.
slide like thing. So I don't know if anyone has any other questions or anything like that. I can stop sharing, I think. Maybe.
Oh, you can do whatever you want. Yeah. So that's it. And yeah, that's unless we have any other questions or comments, I think that's a wrap. It took about 50 minutes. We did pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. This was really amazing.
Thank you for the
Thanks for having
invite.
us. It's so fun to talk about.
I know it is, but I'm so glad you guys did this. Awesome. All right, so we'll be in touch, and I'll send you guys an email after this. And if that's it, well, I hope you guys have a great night.
You
All right.
too. Bye
Thanks.
everyone. Nice to meet you.
Bye. Nice to meet y'all.